symptoms of exposure to oil field gases. So I don't really find that very sort of, I don't know.
So Paul, in addition to, I mean, I think that we're talking about in addition to all the requirements of the CSD, and you may recall that we also have requirements for gas busters to be installed anytime that they're drilling, which essentially allows for the flaring of any gases that would come up from downhole as a result of any type of mishap or encountering any gases that they may find as they're drilling. And so there are those other provisions will remain in place that we're already adopted as part of the CSD to prevent a repeat of that incident from 2006. So those will not go away. I mean, those things will still be there to protect against the opportunity from that happening.
Potentially.
Right. And also there is a requirement for monitoring that is still part of the CSD again, for air monitoring surrounding any drilling. So when they're doing the drilling, those monitors will be in place that would capture whenever there is something that could be emitted from that drilling operation.
Also keep in mind that part of those air monitoring requirements are if the concentration of a gas gets high enough, they have to stop drilling and address it. And that's already built into the CST and existing requirements for drilling a well.
Yeah, all these air monitoring plans, but in fact, almost 20,000 cubic yards of soil in the bioremediation farms and in the piles that were all over the oil field were found to be emitting over 50 parts per million of VOCs into the area of the neighborhood surrounding the oil field. So I really don't feel that reassured with regard to the air monitoring in place with regard to drilling new wells. There's still the potential for that kind of exposure to the neighborhoods adjacent to the Inglewood oil field.
Can I ask a question? Wouldn't it be better to put a per month cap rather than a 25 or 26 per year? I mean, what's to stop the company from drilling a lot of wells in a relatively short period of time and exceeding the maximum? I would prefer to see it normalized to no more than a certain amount of wells per unit time that would achieve that.
So, I think there's limitations already, Charles, on how many wells they can drill. They can only have a maximum, per the settlement agreement, they can only have 2 rigs out there at any given time. So it's not as if they can go ahead and have 25 rigs and be drilling those 25 wells at once. And then, Greg, you may want to elaborate on that.
And the issue that we're trying to address with the 25 wells is long-term exposure to carcinogenic materials. So short exposures, like you were talking about, Paul, are certainly important, but it's not actually what we identified in the HRA as being an issue of concern for the HRA analysis. Now, like we talked about before, the HRA didn't look at accidental upsets like that. So that's sort of a different category that can certainly be an issue, like we saw on Thanksgiving a few years ago. But the issue with 25 wells is to prevent that long-term exposure to carcinogens.
Okay, let's go to Kin Kin.
You also have that issue with regard to the recorded emissions of low-level exposure that's required by AQMD to be reported annually. So anyway, just to bring that up.
Okay, let's go to Kin Kin G and then Melanie Traxler next.
Go ahead, Kin Kin G. You're muted on your part.
Okay. I've unmuted myself, so hopefully folks can hear me now.
You're good to go.
Thank you, John. I understand that even though there hasn't been any new drilling since 2014, the fact is that well maintenance is occurring every year like clockwork. And there's emission of known human carcinogens like benzene and whatnot liberated from the field. So has there any...
Recording where you left off. Press 4.
Okay. I'm talking, but I hear Carmen Spiva's voice, so I'm not sure what's going on. But in any event, how are we mitigating for the fact that benzene and formaldehyde are being liberated from the field? How is there any consideration for including them in the HRA?
So I can answer real quickly on that, and Louise and Dean, you can pitch in if you want. The 2019 scenario, which was the first scenario that we looked at in the HRA, included the well workovers, the maintenance on the wells, as well as the fugitive emissions from the field. And so all of those items were included in the emissions estimates for that scenario. And so there are a number of activities at the field to address those emissions, which Dean could probably talk more about, but related to South Coast AQMD, sniffing activities and various requirements associated with those. They're using fairly clean engines on the workover rigs, tier 4s. So that helped to keep the risks in the HRA fairly low related to that diesel combustion. But they were included in the HRA.
I see. There are some units that are that appear in both table 2, let's see, and table 1, I believe, or table 2 to be specific. Can somebody go over the units that these are reported in? For example, say, because they're not the usual units that biologists talk about in. So say if you were to take benzene, let's see, it says 3.3 E plus O2 under annual pounds. So can somebody explain to me what that unit stands for, or how much that would be in terms that biologists and physicians talk about?
So the E stands for the power of 10. So 3.3 E to the 2 would be 330 pounds. 3.3 times 10 raised to the power of 2. That's notation that's standard in spreadsheets, but I can understand how it's confusing.
I see. So E stands for 10 to the 3. Is that what you said?
It stands for the 10 power. So
10 power. Okay. All right.
So 3.3 times 10 to the second power. That's what that is.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So as you said, there is accounting for the fugitive emissions emanating from the wells that are being maintained and worked on an annual basis. Is that what you said?
That's correct. And we use the emissions that have been approved by the South Coast for their annual emissions reporting.
I see. So are they above or below the South Coast thresholds?
So when you run the health risk model and the dispersion models, these are the total emissions from the field here in table 2. But depending on where they're located, produces different concentrations in the air at different points around the field. And so the model found that they were below the thresholds.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Sure.
Melanie Traxler next, and then Daniel Lee.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah.
Great. So I have 2 questions. One, I may have asked this last time, and I apologize if it's a duplicate, but I forgot the answer. With regard to the various assumptions that went into the HRA, I know that the data and all that was run and methodology was run past SCA QMD. But with regard to the assumptions specific to the operations at the field, I was wondering, has Sentinel Peak Resources signed off on all of those assumptions? Are they consistent with their understanding of how the field is being operated? I know you guys did your due diligence, but I just want to verify that that's been confirmed.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, this goes more into process of this within the update process. At what point, I mean, I know we're here asking questions. Is there an opportunity down the road to continue to provide comments or questions on this as we have more time to dig into it before it goes signed off at the county? What is the process for finalizing this or approving it or whatever?
So the HRA is an informational document. And so, you know, we bring it to the CAP to present the results and all the things, all the findings from it. The intent now is to move forward with the periodic review and finalizing that report with the recommendation, you know, that recommendation that I stated would be written up and people can review that. And then subsequent to that, it would go to hearing before the hearing officer. And then at that hearing, members of the public and obviously members of the CAP, anybody can provide their input to the hearing officer with regards to the recommendation and the other recommendations that are part of the periodic review report. I think that may be what you're asking. And so that's what the process would be. You know, our intent is to move forward as quickly as we can and try to be done with this process by the first quarter. And I don't know, Edgar, if we can talk about, I mean, I think we pretty much have the periodic review information ready to go. And then we would submit it to the hearing officer, and there's got to be a setting of a hearing date and so on.
Yeah, we're looking, I mean, once we start looking into the information, finalize everything, we're looking into the next 3 months based on the availability from the hearing officers. A schedule, we're aiming to have it scheduled within the next 3 months, moving forward with the periodic review.
Actually, I have a question about that, if I may. Given that we have a new supervisor, has their office been able to review anything, or have you connected with them on the periodic review draft report?
I mean, I know they have some documents available to them. We are working on doing a briefing with them on updating on everything. But they have met with our director and have met with other staff in our department as well, and along with other efforts for oil, the oil well ordinance that the department is working on. So they've been involved, but we do want to brief them even more on what Baldwin Hills CSD is going through and the periodic review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Lee.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted to quickly take this opportunity to introduce myself before my very quick question. Currently serve as Vice Mayor on the Culver City Council, and when Mayor Fish is not available, we'll probably be dropping into this configuration. So just wanted to drop in and say hello. And my question is very general, as I'm still coming up to speed on a lot of things. I'm wondering if the oil operator at this point over the last 3 years has ever built anywhere close to the number of maximum allowable new wells within the agreements in the last 3 years.
So there's been no drilling in the last 3 years. You know, they have the opportunity to drill up to 53 total wells when you add the bonus wells. And since the inception of the CSD in December of 2008, they have never drilled the total 53 wells. I believe that the maximum number of wells that were drilled in 2011, and that was 45 wells. And then the next largest number of wells was in 2013 when they did 30 wells. And again, since 2014, in June, there's been no drilling.
Thank you for that. That's what I thought was the case. But very nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Daniel. Paul again for Ozzy.
This question would be for Edgar. You referenced, based on how the question was posed, that you'd be briefing Holly Mitchell's office with regard to what's going on. But what about the 4 other supervisors who actually had approval, were part of the approval process of the Community Standards District? Are you briefing them as well?
That was something that we could discuss with our director, and we could brief them on everything going on with the Baldwin Hills.
So that's a yes?
I'll speak to our director, our management. I could get back to you next meeting to confirm with you if that's something we could do.
It seems like it would be a requirement, and it required a majority to approve it. So they should also be assessed as to what the periodic review is about.
My supervisor Alex is on here. Alex, can you ask follow up on that?
Yeah. Good evening. We can brief the supervisors. We have a monthly meeting with their deputies, and we can bring it up and see if they'd like to have a briefing. But
so it would be require their approval of any changes.
We can bring it up to them and let them know that there's briefing that there's available. If they like it, then we can brief them on it. The reason why we're going to brief the supervisor is because Supervisor Mitchell is because she's new. She doesn't know what we've been doing, or she probably doesn't have the details of what we've been doing here in this effort, and that's why we agreed that we're going to go ahead and call her up. We had a meeting with our management last 2 days, and we were planning on scheduling something within the next 2 to 3 weeks with them.
Okay, I'd appreciate if you'd say we will as opposed to we can, and that sort of designates a commitment to speaking to all the supervisors as opposed to just one.
What exactly is it that you
well, they approved
with briefing
they approved the CSD.
Is it the periodic review process? What is it that
because
you
the periodic
want
review is
to know about?
Make any changes to the CSD? So they would have to again vote on that. So I think that they should also be brought up to speed with regard to periodic review.
Yeah, it's not required, but we can bring it up to our management, see if they want to brief the other supervisors. The requirement is to bring it up to the
vote. I'm sorry
for a hearing officer for a decision, but it's not required to bring it up to all the supervisors. But I can bring it up to our management and see if they'd like us to brief.
If there were any changes,
I think there's a confusion. So if there's any changes,
it would go to a vote of the entire board, not just to one supervisor.
Yeah, I think if it results where we have to make actual changes to the CSD, they definitely will be briefed. It has to go to the board, right? But if the changes right now that are being proposed is not changes to the actual CSD itself, it's part of the annual drilling plan, right, Luis? I mean, that's kind of the thinking we're at right now, what we're discussing. So it's nothing finalized. It's nothing that's going to be on the CSD. Changing it at all. So at the moment, it's not something that we're briefing all the other supervisors. So that's the reason why we're answering your question that way.
Yeah, and so one last thing just to clarify is that this goes to the hearing officer. That is the process of the periodic review. The idea with the recommendation that we have is for the changes in the implementation within the language of the annual drilling plan requirement. And if you recall, the annual drilling plan contains information regarding whether there is additional mitigation that can be adopted and so on. And so the language within it already provides for an avenue for us to address this issue that we have identified as part of the HRA. And by virtue of that, modify that implementation will be sufficient. And so without reopening the CSD, which you're correct, Paul, that would require the Board of Supervisors actually would have to go to the Planning Commission first and then subsequently to the Board of Supervisors. That's not the intent at this point. The intent is that it would go to the hearing officer and change of the implementation of the annual drilling plan.
Okay, Tim Jones.
Thank you very much, John. A very humid evening to everyone. If we accept at face value that I guess we were calling it the worst case scenario, was 25 wells drilled would exceed the limits that are set. Is that safe to say? If in fact that's the case, and you're saying that if we were to exceed that, ultimately the operator would move to mitigating factors or mitigating situation. The question is this: that's the worst case scenario. By definition, if you get to that, don't you have to come up to like a really bad case scenario? And if in case you come up to a really bad case scenario, wouldn't it make sense to take the mitigating factors that you're saving for the worst case scenario so that we don't even end up at a not so good scenario? I mean, that's the first question. And the second question for you is, I reviewed the map, and in the map, it located the receptors. And my question on that is, I did not find a green square in the Baldwin Hills neighborhood area, Baldwin Hills Estates area. Closest one that I found on the northeast corridor was Baldwin Hills Elementary School, or one of the schools in that area. So again, the second question is simply, is there a receptor in what direction that most of the prevailing winds blow in the Baldwin Hills Estates homeowners area? That's it.
So I think for the first part of what you're asking, when we looked at the worst case scenario, we're looking at the total of 46 wells. And again, the exceedance that we find is at the fence line. So, and again, you would have to be there, standing there for 30 years during, that time that 46 wells are being drilled every year for that. And there is already a number of mitigation measures that are in place that will continue to be part of how the facility is operated. So we're using many, many layers of conservatism here to come up with the numbers that we're coming up with. When we say 25 wells, we know that 25 wells would not exceed the threshold at the fence line again. So you still have a level of protection in that. The number at the actual sensitive receptor is substantially lower than that. And then Greg, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit in his second question.
Yeah, so I apologize for any confusion with the map, but the green squares are just where we're considered sensitive receptors like schools, and we included the college in that list. If you look in the appendices, you'll see that the entire area is gridded with receptors every 100 meters. And so if you're looking for the risk at a specific receptor, you can find that location and find that receptor number. So there are a lot more receptors points than just those green squares.
I appreciate that, gentlemen. And just a quick follow-up to Luis. Definitely appreciate the explanation and even the understanding that the operator is being as conservative as possible. But given that we're working specifically with binary with X's and O's, if it's deemed necessary to have mitigating, if we exceed that worst case scenario, to have the situation mitigated, aren't we hellbound, if we're going to follow that path, to keep in mind that we could do a better job if we were to put those plans into action prior to getting to that point?
So the whole idea with the recommendation to the modification of the annual drilling plan is that they wouldn't be drilling more than 25 wells per year. And so that would provide for an assurance that there will never be an exceedance, even at the fence line. And so you're really adding, if we're talking about 46 being the level or the number of wells that would exceed the threshold at the fence line, obviously at 25, we found that would not be the case. So you have a certain level of protection. And the level of protection will be that once adopted, you wouldn't be able to drill beyond 25 wells without a substantial additional mitigation, as we discussed before, moving farther away from the fence line and that sort of thing.
Appreciate your answers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I guess you guys can move on to settlement agreement now.
Yeah. So next item will be the settlement agreement update that we provide every year. It was sent out to the group. Let's see, kind of similar to previous years with response to each of the requirements of the settlement agreement. If anyone has any questions, or Lucindine, if you have anything to add to that. Any questions?
Well, if no one else has any, I'll just talk about something that, the one thing that's different from prior years is the timetable not being met. The settlement agreement, I was not a party to the lawsuit, so I'm not really on either side, but the litigants said that certain things had to be done by a deadline and that deadline wasn't met. And basically what this letter said is you sent out a letter and said, yeah, we're not going to meet it. Is that all that happened, or did you get some sort of approval from them? Did they actually get the letter? Sending out a letter seems like a pretty mild response to not complying with the term of the settlement agreement.
So are you referring to the DPH, the health report
Yes.
delays, John?
Yes.
Yes, and I think DPH can talk about that more. I do believe that, within the constraints of the settlement agreement, if you're in violation of the settlement agreement, I guess you would have to go to the judge and then, bring up the fact that the county is in violation at this point of the settlement agreement because they haven't provided that public health report. And then the judge would say, well, what's the remedy? The remedy is you got to prepare the report, and DPH has provided to all the litigants information about the delays and the reason for the delay. And so the remedy will be evident as part of what would be asked to be done here. There's not really any other avenue other than, okay, you're late. I guess you can relitigate this thing and come up to a separate settlement agreement, but I haven't heard any of the litigants come up to suggest anything like that.
I'm not talking about getting that far. I think, and again, I'm not one of the litigants, so I don't really get a say in this, but it seemed to me that there were reasonable reasons for the delay, namely trying to tie it in with another study. I'm only talking about the process of notifying people. My first question was, did you actually communicate with them and have a back and forth conversation, or was it just you sent out a letter to some address that you had, and if it got there, great. If it didn't get there, we did enough.
Yeah, I defer to DPH or the county to respond to that.
From where I have to look into further into that, see what was done. And from our end, I know there was some communication. I'm not sure to what extent, John. So I could look into that and get back to you, unless anyone from health departments here that's more aware. Okay.
Christine's on, so she may be able to answer more. But we did get a letter. I don't know how they determined it, but it went to our right. Clearly our CEO changed from before, so they had the information correct, and it went directly to our current CEO, and outlined what we all knew, what had changed, what was being, why the delay, and all of that. And I can't recall. I have a letter in the office. So I can't recall specifically what it said, but I believe there was an opportunity to contact the county if we had any concerns or issues with the process.
Yeah, Christine from Public Health. And we sent a letter to all the litigants at the addresses we had. And we heard from many of them that they got them, but we didn't go back and confirm with every single one that they got it. But I can send you all those copies of those letters if you like.
No, Ben, you did have some communication, at least with a reasonable number of the litigants, at least to the extent that they called you up and said, we got the letter.
Not necessarily that they called us up and said it, but I knew they got it. I'm trying to remember. I think we sent it by email and by mail.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And so, you know, I'm trying to think if we got any email bounces. I don't even think we got any email bounces. But I don't know for sure. I know that some got the letter for sure.
Okay. Melanie Traxler.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak on that issue too. So Culver City did receive the letter. You know, I believe that talking through the health working group, we agreed that that was a process that needed to happen before we could comfortably embark on any idea of delaying the preparation of the report of the study. And I think too that I may be wrong on this, Christine, but I believe there was a follow-up letter that kind of a status letter that may have gone just to the CAP, but I think that could have gone to the litigants too. So I think there was the original letter, and then 6 or 8 months after that, a status letter talking about the fact that budget was being put in place and moving forward with that. And so just speaking on behalf of Culver City, you know, we didn't respond formally other than we're aware that that's what's going on, and we're still kind of waiting to see the outcome of the process. And since we don't know, you know, I know you're going to speak on the RFP and such later, so we're just, you know, waiting to see how things move forward.
Okay. Paul Ferrazzi.
As one of the litigant groups, we received a letter. I know I drafted a very long letter in response to it. I'm not sure I sent it, thinking that we would better see, it would be better to see, seeing how CARB seemed to be aligning itself with the potential of them overlapping and being able to use that data from CARB, that we thought we would allow a good faith effort on the part of the Department of Public Health, because we know that the supervisor's office actually doesn't involve, or previous county supervisor doesn't involve any sort of good faith effort. And even on the part of the planning director, we've seen a lack of that with regard to sort of participation on the CAP.
Okay, anyone else on the settlement agreement? Okay.
Any questions? Okay, we can move on to the next item, which is fourth quarter 2020 groundwater monitoring results, provided to everyone in the group and also posted on the website. Bruce and Dean, do you guys want to chime in on anything on the report?
Dean, do you want to touch on that?
Sure, yeah, the results were only 2 wells were sampled, and all the samples were within the drinking water standards. So there's not a lot to discuss. We've seen arsenic go over the standard once in a while. That was not the case in this most recent sampling event. So that's a quick summary. Any questions?
Don't see any questions. So can move on to the next item, which is the fourth quarter 2020 complaint log. Also send out to everyone and post it on our website. For the fourth quarter, there was a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complaints. One being 2 odor, 3 odor, 1 that was kind of noise, 3 noise ones, and a few of these actually helped out the oil field to find some issues going on at some of the stations. So, if anyone has any questions on these?
Melanie?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so I just, I found that this complaint log was a little bit unusual compared to some of the past because I don't remember so many incidents of equipment having maintenance issues within a single quarter period. And so my first question has to do with the 2 incidents reported, the one on 10/25 and the one on 11/4. So that's the second and the third items. They seem to be located in the same area of the field. And I was just curious, did that end up being the same well? Did it not get resolved the first time, or was it a separate well? And then my second question is just, as I alluded to, this is kind of unusual to have 3 separate maintenance issues within a period. Is there any particular explanation for that? Has there been any adjustment to the operations or oversight of the field? Has there been any adjustments in how maintenance is handled? Or is there some other conditions that might have contributed to this? Any thoughts on that?
I can probably answer both of those, Melanie. This is Dan. The answer to your first question is they were different wells. They were not the same wells, although they were close to each other. And 2, I mean, other than when you get a couple of these in a short period of time, you probably are a little more attentive, but we haven't changed our maintenance program. We think it's successful and effective. And this was just one of those odd cases where these are rubber belts that, burned up. And so, it's not that we're doing anything differently or wrong. We're doing the same maintenance, and it was just a month where we had a couple in a row. So we do believe we have a good maintenance program, and we continue to, put our efforts forth there.
Thanks. I kind of wondered if maybe the whole COVID situation had less time out in the field, or if there was, some explanation or something.
No, we should still have a fully supported staff in the field, handling everything.
Yes, great. And on that third, on that last item, number 5, which is more toward, I think, the east side of the field. I don't think that it doesn't say whether that was a belt or not. It was some other, was it a belt issue too on that one? The screeching noise where you should shut it down, or was there some other issue with that?
I don't know, Joe. I don't know the details. Joe, do you know the details of that one?
Yeah, it was more so a noise complaint. We shut it down. I'm trying to remember how that was resolved, but it was more so related to the belt. And I think that was on the northeast portion of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Paul
Dan,
Fries.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Who are you talking to?
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, thank you. This is following up with Ms. Traxler's questions as well. I don't have it in front of me because I'm substituting my note-taking computer for the conference. I did note in one of the reports that after the problem was a belt, determined to be a belt, that the operator noted that they needed to check other equipment in the area. And shortly thereafter, after that notation, there seemed to be another problem. So my question is, during the follow-up to where someone specifically noted that guys, I think we need to check this out. Whether or not that one that had gone out was included in a unit that was previously checked. And secondly, kind of along the same lines, from, I guess you would call a layman's perspective, when you take your car in and you're told that you need an alternator belt, more than likely the mechanic's going to tell you, well, it's about time that you change all your belts, buddy. Is this a situation where it would behoove us to literally find a sort of a kink in our overall maintenance and say, okay, let's make an adjustment, given that we've had this problem, as Ms. Traxel pointed out, unusual problem, that replacing the belts might be a good idea at this point?
I'm trying to think of your first question, Tim. Let me think back to that. I don't know the answer to your first question. I'll have to check into that. I'm located in Bakersfield these days, so I'm not as close to the operations as I used to be. I'll have to investigate that, see what they found, and get back to you at the next meeting on whether or not they found anything else that might have been related. And then as far as changing out all the belts, I don't know that we would go and just change everything out in a large number. These belts get changed out for various reasons with maintenance programs and replacing motors and such. And so it's possible that if you have 10 wells in an area, 5 of the wells are new, 1 of the belts has been there for a year, the other 4 have been there for 2 years or so. So you wouldn't be able to go through and really change them all out, or you wouldn't want to. You would have to know the life of the belt and factor that into it. So, but I'll have to check into the first one and get back to you next month on the answer to that.
Okay, so the belts typically are changed out on a rotating basis based on years that they've been in
based
service?
on failures, the failure rate or the years. If they go and work over a well and they notice that it's old, they would replace it. Those sorts of things. There might be a couple of different reasons why they might change out a belt. If they work over a well, they would inspect everything before they put it back into service. And so
last question. I'm sorry. Sure. What is the most catastrophic problem we could possibly have by a complete belt failure?
Probably just either the noise or the burning. The unit would stop pumping, and so there would be no potential for spill or anything of that nature. It would just be what you've seen here, maybe a noise complaint. The motor would run, or the motor would run without moving anything. It would burn up, things of that nature. I can't think of anything, no endangerment to the environment, no mechanical risk to anybody. It would just be your motor would burn up.
So if the motor burnt up in an area that is composed of a flammable substance, i.e. oil, would that create a bigger problem?
I don't know that I've ever heard that happening. I mean, before the motor ever got to the point where a fire would evolve or anything, the operators would probably have found it. The unit would stop pumping and they would have noticed it. And so I don't know if I've ever seen a circumstance where the fire started because of a motor. It would be a very rare possibility, I would say.
So that would be the most catastrophic issue that could result. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, Paul, Razi?
My question is very simple. What were the previous dates of the inspections prior to those wells failures or malfunctions, however you want to frame it?
I wouldn't know the answer to that, Paul.
I know. Okay, so can we get the answer to that?
I can look. I can check. I'm not going to make any promises. I can certainly check.
Well, it seems like something you should be able to. That it would be documented, and it would be an easy thing to find with regard to last inspection.
Now, I don't know how easy it is to find, but I think it is a good question. I think it is something you should know and hopefully do know and can get back to us on.
I'll look into it.
Thanks.
Okay, any more questions on the complaint log?
Don't see any.
All right, we can move on to the 2020 abandoned well testing report. I'll hand this over to Luis and Dean to provide a briefing on it.
Okay, so we're abandoned soil vapor testing.
Yeah.
The report's done. Joe can help me out here. He was involved with preparation of that. We did close to 70, I believe, Joe.
Yeah.
73, I think.
So the reason there were so many tested this cycle was because of the 5-year cycle, whereby if locations are deemed not to be leaking above the 50 ppm threshold, they go 5 years without a test. And so this was the 5th year for a large number of those. And so they were all tested. And there are several sites that were over the 50 ppm, which will trigger retesting. And actually they were significantly over the threshold. And so those sites are being monitored and investigated to determine the cause of the higher numbers. The initial results are showing that it was from the contamination in the soil, but that investigation has not been completed. I think Joe might be able to shed a little more light on that part of it.
Yeah, there's I'll say, there's several different wells that were over the 50 parts per million level, and there's 3 of them that we're focused on. Take a look at it, because the crux of this is to look for, abandoned wells that are leaking. And so there's 3 locations we prioritize to take a look at, and we're planning on addressing those in the next, couple of weeks. I'll pose that way. With the holidays, we just couldn't really get too much done. One of those locations is a former biofarm area too, so we know that there's soil impacts in there, and that was relatively, high reading. So we're in process of doing this, and we'll see what we come up with.
So part of the process, just to add a little bit more to this, part of the process for this program is to dig around the areas where, to do excavations in the areas surrounding where you're finding the high readings and identify the nearest well that could be leaking. The remedy for this particular portion of the CSD is to notify CalGEM so that they can then require, if needed, if a well is found to be leaking, for that well to be reabandoned or some other measure to be taken. So the investigation continues. I know that there are some soil probes, permanent probes that are put in place in order to get data from those areas where the substantial readings were found. And we're working with the operator to try to figure out what's going on. I know that we had one in the previous year where there was a similar situation where we had a high reading, and the operator found an old pipeline that had been leaking gas, and that pipeline was repaired. And so we're trying to figure out if there is something similar to that occurring here in this series of readings from this year. So we will come back, obviously, and provide more information as we ascertain what's going on there.
What's your guess as to the timetable? When do you think you'll be completing the tentative review that you're starting on?
Well, we'll be able to find out some information here likely in the next couple of weeks, but some of these are going to take a little bit of time. One of the things we take a look at the well records to see how the abandonment was, how long ago it was, what was the condition of the abandonment, and so forth. We've checked into that, and then we also take a look at our field drawings for our pipelines and see, well, what's in close proximity to this location, if those may be suspect. So we go through, look at that, and then we actually excavate down to, in the past, on a couple of different locations, we've excavated down right to the wellhead, and we test, we basically check there for any leakage at the top of the cap of the well, of the capped well, or along the sides. And in many cases, we have Montrose, a third party, come in. They do what we call our leak detection repair program, which is hugely comprehensive. And so we have them come swing by with their FID meters to check on those, just to do a third-party verification. In the past, there's 2, or I think it's 3 wells where we checked and we just didn't get any readings. So it was from another source. One of those, we did find a leaky pipeline, and we replaced that pipeline. And over a period of time, it's it has reduced down in terms of the methane concentrations in the soil. So we'll just have to see. It's going to be a work in progress. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, Joe meant to say months, not weeks.
It could very well be, yes. I mean, we're going to do our best to push, and we're pushing on to get that done. So.
But it sounds like we can expect updates from you at the next couple of CAP meetings, and hopefully it'll be done by then. But at least there'll be something to report.
We'll do what we can.
Joe, are you happy?
What's that?
Are you happy now?
What am I happy about?
Well, hold on. Let me ask a question here. Those results weren't just high; they were extraordinarily high. Have you ever seen results really that orders of magnitude higher before?
Yes, and it's kind of a 2-part question. Yes and no. It is. Yeah. Some of those results are high, and it's like unusually high. And what we've done, and Dean's been with me, when Dean's come out, and even when he's not there, I attempt to go by these locations about every 2 weeks just to take a look at the surface. I have an FID. That's a flame ionization detector that checks for methane. And go along the surface where we've done the testing just to see, do we have any exposure? That is, do we have any exposure to the workers or any let's say unsafe condition, where we cut, and we're just getting no readings at the surface and so forth. So a lot of this is either contained or it readily disperses as it hits the surface. I think most of it's contained.
But you're basing that on the fact that it's a low pressure, that in the report you said that because the pressure was low, you're assuming that it won't be a health hazard. What if the pressure begins to increase? Would you be able to detect that?
We can only detect that based upon the test time that we do the work. So we'll be able to see on the next phase of testing whether we have that. We just haven't seen that. It says that it's not a, that's not an issue, is what it's telling us. So we just don't see where, it's a safety issue for us and so forth. But we are checking on a periodic basis to do our due diligence on that. One other thing, and there's a couple locations where we've uncovered in the past where we've hit impacted soils, and they're pretty impacted, and they liberated quite a bit of VOCs. I'll just be frank with you. And so those soils we've taken and basically drummed up or put in a container, and they shipped off site. But we'll just have to see what we come up with here.
If you decide that it's biogenic rather than from a petroleum source, would your mitigation efforts be different?
Yeah, it would be. And right now we're not seeing that. Based upon the results we're getting right now, we don't see it as being a biogenic, or we don't see it as being
decay related.
Yeah, decay related.
Okay.
So Charles, just a couple of clarifications. We're looking at methane, and these are soil probes. So they go down into the soil and they're measuring in there. I know that when we go out in the field, we also use our handheld monitor to try to ascertain if there is some in the surface, and we haven't found any. And then lastly, also I think you talked about toxicity or something like that. And just to be clear, methane it's an asphyxiant, and it's obviously explosive. And it would be harmful to you if you were inside a room and it would displace the air that you could breathe and asphyxiate you, but it wouldn't have in open air that same kind of toxicity levels or anything like that.
Sure.
This is David. I did want to. Joe mentioned the soil and the biofarms as part of the incidental issue on the methane. So, in this process of looking at the wells, how much land are you covering? i.e., that where you would find this legacy soil. You found it instantly on this because you were tracking the methane. But is it possible to find it other places in your research or your investigations?
Well, yeah, I would say that that's possible. We do have historic sites over there that we do have marked out that would have to eventually be cleaned up at some point in time. But right now in the biofarm, this would be somewhat typical of what you'd have in a biofarm area in shallow soils.
Got it. Thank you.
I don't know if I did answer your question, but I tried.
You did.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, you've kind of answered this as I'm listening along. The question primarily is whether or not there is any soil remediation that's necessary. If so, what type of remediation? Well, you kind of answered it in the sense that you're doing a dig and haul. The concern, at least my concern there, is given the weather patterns that we've had recently with these high winds, are we pretty much exposing ourselves to additional airborne contaminants as well?
I would have to say no. And the reason, Tim, I say that is simply because when we're going over there, these are covered areas. When we're going over to these locations and checking, we're not getting any emissions above the surface and so forth. So in my opinion, it's pretty well contained in these areas. It's just that when we scrape at the surface and uncover it, yeah, that's an issue. And just to clarify, when we dig up soils like that, we have to monitor with a PID meter. So it's a photoionization detector, and any soils that we get above 50 parts per million, for instance, when we take soil to our biofarm, we cannot take soils that high based upon our Rule 1166 permit. So we typically keep those soils in place, or we will put them into a stockpile, cover those, and then those have to be shipped off site within a certain period of time after we dig those up. We don't commonly get to that point with those. We usually look at the soil locations when we're doing remediation, that sort of thing, for soils that go over the biofarm, and we make sure that there's under the 50 parts per million limit before it goes over to the biofarm.
And for those that are over the limit, is there any geo or biopolymer remediation done by the operator?
No.
Thank you.
Melanie?
Thank you. Yeah, my question had to do with the soils too. I know I've raised this question at a previous annual report, but I think on the last report we had a much smaller number of wells being tested, if I recall. So I was surprised to see that in this report, about a dozen, for example, about a dozen of the wells with over the 1,000 count were noted to have the soil contaminated and stained soils at the surface. And in the report itself, it also, made considerable reference to the fact that the detectable levels of methane were most likely due to the soil and not due to potential for leakage, which is good, which is a good thing. But it did raise that whole question of like, well, how much cumulative, when you take that number of wells cumulatively, and this report is only a snapshot of the 70 wells that happen to be monitored this particular cycle, because we're on either the 2-year or the 5-year cycle. So this report, when we talk about, a cumulative, doesn't even give us a full cumulative methane level when we're thinking about that. So when you look at the total number of wells, it makes me wonder about how much kind of fugitive methane is kind of getting out there simply because of the spillage and contamination onto the soils. And Joe, I was glad that you explained that upon occasion you do throw some of those soils in a barrel and haul them off. I I'd like to know where a little more information on what kind of volumes get pulled away kind of typically when that happens, and what, again, is, if you could explain again, what is the threshold where you make that determination? And is there any, specific agency that comes out and monitors on a regular basis for spills, aside from around that? And I'm just wondering why there isn't maybe more effort to clean that up if this tends to trigger these higher readings.
Well, we do attempt to tackle some of those impacted areas. I'll put it that way. So, kind of falling back, we have to follow. It's a Rule 1166 soils management. That is, so this is from AQMD, and so when we excavate and we get soils that are greater than 50 parts per million, and if we have to excavate that material out, we have to put that off to the side in a designated pile. It has to be covered until we ship it off site. And but we don't do that too often. We usually look for those areas on the site, which we did a bit last year, where we have impacted soils, but with the low volatility, those go over to the one existing biofarm that we operate on. And so in that vein, I'm probably giving, in that vein, I think last year we excavated around just close to 2,000 cubic yards. And that's all, that goes to the biofarm. It's basically treated over there, and the bugs build up and basically chow away, I'll say, on the TPH in there. And it's low volatility stuff. And those are actually clean, and we're looking at some point to place those soils back on site. And then we'll start over again by putting more soil over there.
Got it. Thank you. And I just wanted to follow up on a comment you made, Luis, about the methane. And while there may be enough dispersion going on that it's not an imminent health issue, unless you're right there breathing it in, it still contributes to air quality emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So that's still an overall concern, and that's why I brought up the point of cumulative. Just kind of now making me think about what would that bigger picture look like when we take all the wells collectively and think about it. But I know that's not the point of the well monitoring report. It's just a thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Melanie. That's a really good point. It's a GHG gas. Now, to alleviate the concern a little bit, it's that I will again point out that when we have taken measurements on the surface and when the operator has taken measurements of the surface, we do not detect anything. So while it is in the soil, the liberation of it into the air, it may not be happening to the point that we're able to detect it with our monitors.
Yeah, one more quick clarification on the monitoring program. It's not either 2 years or 5 years. A well or a grid area has to test below 50 ppm for 2 years in a row to qualify for testing every 5 years. If it goes over the 50 ppm each year, it has to be tested each year. And it has to go 2 years in a row below the 50, which is the background level of methane for the entire LA basin. So the threshold is essentially the background level for the whole area. And if it goes over 50, it has to be tested every single year.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. I remembered it was kind of a complicated scheduling process depending on what happened the previous testing period. So, okay, thank you.
Paul Ferrazzi.
So I have a number of questions, I guess, that have come out of this discussion. AQMD has been advised of any abandoned wells that are emitting above 50 ppm in air.
Well, we wouldn't, we're not, let me put it this way. We haven't ran into any that emit more than that. that is where we've gone, and it's 2 or 3 locations here in the recent past that we've gone down to. There's been basically non-detect with an FID. So if we do hit that, we're required to both tell the DRP, required to tell Edgar, as well as inform CalGEM in that regards. Now, there's not a trigger in that regards to tell AQMD, but it might get captured under our LDAR program, our leak detection repair program.
They actually litigated based on the 50 parts per million or above 50 parts per million that were in the operator identified 19,000 something cubic yards of soil that were both in the bioremediation farms and in the mounds that were covered with plastic all over the oil field.
Okay, you're talking about
they were required to incinerate that soil based on the litigation. But it seems to me that there could be the possibility that these leaking wells are emitting over 50 parts per million in air. Although based on your measurements, it's only when you stir up the soil.
Well, we're not finding that it's coming from the abandoned well. Let me put it that way. We're finding that it's from impacted soils, either covering those wells, or in at least in one case from a pipeline that had a gas leak in it.
Right, but there's no attachment to well or soil with regard to the 50 parts per million in air requirement or violation that it would initiate with AQMD, correct?
Well, that's correct. I mean, yeah, so it seems like we're comparing apples to oranges here in a sense. Our leak detection and repair program looks at all the active wells and idle wells and so forth. So we look at those locations, and those are a number of points that we check. I think we have, on a quarterly basis, just for our LA Basin or our Inglewood location, it's something like 180,000 points that we check on a month or on a quarterly basis. So the abandoned wells aren't covered by that.
So I guess the other question is, when did you get a permit renewal with AQMD, because they shut down all the bioremediation farms based on that litigation?
Yeah, so ours is still in operation. So that biofarm is permitted through the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and it's covered by our Rule 1166 program. That's through AQMD. Now we haven't, we're still viable operators of that, and we're within our compliance requirements for that. So.
And which farm is it?
It's I can't remember the name. It's LAI North is what we refer to it as. So it's basically almost in the midst of our site, Paul.
So is that the one closest to the soccer field?
No. That one you mentioned there, and I'll just say frankly, that's one where we got one of the higher elevated readings from the soil gas, though. It's over reasonably close to there, but that's a former biofarm area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that seems to be it, Edgar.
Okay. Move on to our last item for regional planning. It's this is just on the this was discussed last meeting. We provided the draft annual reports. We got no comments last meeting. This is just to inform you guys been approved through our department for the 2021 annual drilling plan. Anyone has any questions? If not, then this concludes our update for regional planning.
Thank you. Last chance. Any questions?
This is David again. I just had one question. After discussing the different agencies involved, and this is for Edgar and the county, has there been an effort to reactivate the multi-agency coordination committee? I know we spoke of that months back, and I just wanted to find out if there was an engagement to have CalGEM, AQMD, DTSC, and other agencies, LA County Fire and Chem Unit, involved in where we are with the oil field at the moment.
I did initially start when we spoke, when I got involved as the primary. the project. However, with the COVID stuff, I kind of held back on it. I didn't get some responses, so I'll follow up with that actually, and I'll try to get that going again and make sure I got the right contacts for every agency.
Thank you very much.
Monica Embry?
So I don't know, Edgar.
30 days before. It's a notification, the regular notification we do with 30 days before the hearing. It's both. We could take in both written and during the hearing officer.
Paul Frazzi.
I'm not sure if this is, I mean, it's part of comment to regional planning, but it has to do with the previous meeting. So do you want me to do it in open discussion, or do you want me to do it right now?
You're on a roll. Go for it.
All right. So, I submitted the California Geological Survey memo from Parrish to Harris. And then the comments that were in the September CAP meeting are ludicrous with regard to any due diligence on the part of planning and public works and the state geologist. Oh, it doesn't address this, so we don't have any comment to make. And yet it was the public works and the state geologist that went to Dogger asking for help in apprising the conclusions in the 2012 ground movement survey. And that led to meetings in 2013 with the county, the operator, Dogger, and the California Geological Survey, specifically William Bryant, one of their geologists, who said that he didn't agree with the conclusions in that 2012 ground movement survey. And yet the only thing that the county states, any of the departments, is it wasn't addressed to us, we have no comment. And then we don't have the documents, even though the document was named in that memo, and a simple Google search would have provided it. So I just wanted to put that on the record, that you don't seem to be following through with your duty of care and or your duty of diligence with regard to comments and or information brought to the CAP meetings. And then I guess a follow-up question is, David, what did you find out in trying to contact John Parrish, who actually was fired by Jason Marshall, who was then fired by Governor Newsom?
No response on Parrish, and no trace that I was able to follow up on.
Because he'd been fired.
I don't know if he was fired. I don't know what happened to him, but he was there.
And I made the comment that it might be better to contact Steve Bolin, who is the acting state geologist, and that he might actually respond. Did you do that?
No, I have not spoken to Mr. Bowman, but I can reach out to him to find out. I think the goal was to speak to the person who wrote the memo, but I can check with Bowman to see if he has any thoughts on the memo and any reference to the history of it.
Well, I have, and they don't respond, nor does the Public Affairs Office of the Department of Conservation.
Okay, I will send an email and I will copy you to UDOAC and see if I can get at least a response with regards to your inquiry.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Edgar and Luis. I don't see on the agenda an operator update, but I know Dan loves talking, so I'll give you a chance if you want to. If you don't have anything to say, that's okay too.
John, I have one last question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. Is there a way to get the location of the biofarms?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I mean, again, it's kind of in the midst of the field. There was a number of them, of those that were active years ago, but we only have one biofarm now. So if that's okay with Dan, we can provide that location.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on to operator update.
Yeah, I'm on the agenda, John. Number E.
Where is it?
As far as well activities for the month of January, we had 4 maintenance rigs operating most of the work days, and we did not have any rework rigs operating for the month. We had a community alert notification system test conducted on December the 15th. The test included 35 entities, I'll say, that was comprised of CAP members, neighbors, local fire and sheriff stations, and Sentinel Peak employees. So 35 people or 35 entities were included. We had 30 email addresses on file for those 35 people, and all 30 emails were successfully sent. And we had 40 phone numbers. You could put multiple phone numbers on if you wanted to. And those numbers were a mix of home numbers, work numbers, cell phones, and other. I'm not sure what other would be. So of the 40 calls, 19 reached an answering machine. 1 was listed as busy. I didn't know you could get a busy signal these days. 16 were actually answered live, and 4 were answered by an operator. And so, and that concludes the test for this year. See you next year. And that's all I had, John.
Okay, any questions? Is there really an agenda that has you on it?
Well,
am I looking at the wrong? Am I looking at the wrong agenda? Is what I really need to know. And if
so,
Edgar
would put out one, and it listed us as E, right behind all the regional planning stuff.
It's right under the last item for regional planning. On the first page, bottom.
I must be looking at a different agenda, which is okay.
That's okay.
Unless I'm missing something. The only thing I have left on mine is open discussion and a working group assessment update. Is there anything else that I am missing?
No, just next thing is the open discussion with the health assessment work group.
Okay, so let's start with the health working group update.
It looks like they sent you a different agenda so they could try to end early.
I wish it was that smart.
Let's stick with that.
So good news, and Christine can share more, but she called me today she let me know today that the solicitation for the contractor to do the health study is going live. Well, unless anything happens, hopefully not, we'll go live next week. At that point, once the solicitation goes live, then we can see about scheduling a full update on what happened, the steering committee process. There's a report that can be released. Just none of that could be released before the solicitation could be went live. So hopefully at the next meeting, there could be a fuller discussion and presentation about the steering committee process, that report. The steering committee members are meeting to prepare a document that will go, that will be included with that report. And I think that's it. Anything else, Christine?
I don't think so.
So we're moving late, but we're moving.
Yeah, I need to double check to make sure that I can, what I can talk about at the next meeting.
Okay.
I just need to make sure I need to run that by council.
Okay.
Okay, Deborah?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Happy New Year, belatedly. Question. I live in Raintree, and on the townhouse side, when we look up into the hills, we see a tall tower that usually is not there. What is the purpose of that tower? It's been there for, I don't know, 2-3 weeks already.
I just typed you an answer, Deborah. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to check into that and get back to the cap. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
No. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You don't know, Joe, do you?
No, it's not a maintenance rig, is it?
Well, a white tire, I can't imagine that's one of our pieces of equipment, but
Yeah.
we'll check and get back.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else for either the health working group or open discussion?
Yeah, Annie. We have one.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Paul?
Christina?
Yeah,
Christine?
I was
Or
wondering.
Paul?
I was wondering how many idle wells are actually tested for emissions, and when.
All of them. So when you ask that, Paul, basically every quarter, as part of our LDAR program, all active and idle wells are actually assessed. They're the FID sniffer.
So there's been sort of the discovery after the classification of wells in Culver City that I believe involve 11 wells that are idle inside Culver City's jurisdiction. Are you including those?
Yes.
Okay. Not specific to the surface area, but outside the surface area.
I'm not quite following you there, but all of our
within outside the fence line, like the one that was in the Little League field. In the park,
that
things like that.
if it's outside our fence line, I'd say no.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I also don't have on my copy of the agenda approval of minutes, but since we have minutes, it probably is on everyone else's agenda. And unless there is an objection, the minutes for the December meeting will be considered approved.
John, there was just one minor change. Tim asked that for the question regarding, I'm blanking out on what it was, but he wanted to make sure that the question that was asked by him, in case there is a follow-up to it in the future, it is in record that he was the one that was asking about that topic. I'm blanking out on the topic. Tim, if you could help me out.
But you're just changing the name of who asked the question?
From Captain Member to Tim Jones asking the question.
You're too young to have these senior moments, Edgar.
There's about cancer risk studies, and the minutes have been revised accordingly.
Thank you. Okay, if that's all for tonight, thank you all for attending. We will see you in February. Have a good rest of the month and go get your COVID shots.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Stay safe.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.